Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bleav in Bengal podcast. Yours truly, Solomon Wilcots. Cincinnati Bengals come away with a 27-20 win over the Dallas Cowboys. It's absolutely phenomenal in terms of how well the Cincinnati Bengals played on offense. Once again, Joe Burrow over 300 yards passing. Another game with three touchdown passes. It's the fourth consecutive game where he's had over 300 yards passing and three touchdowns, 5 straight games with 3 touchdown passes or more. Joe Burrow is playing at an MVP type level. I don't know that you can get a quarterback to play any better than he is. In fact, all of the other quarterbacks who have had 4 consecutive games over 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns in those games all had winning records and all went on to win MVP awards, from Patrick Mahomes to of course, Peyton Manning and the great Steve Young. The other guys who've done it have all been MVPs, all went on to have winning records. And, of course, Joe Burrow is still playing at a very high level. 6 games so far this year where he's thrown for over 300 yards and 3 or more touchdown passes. The Monday night game was the first one that he won. So he's done it 5 times this year, and he's 1-4 in those games. But the defense delivered. Better yet, the special teams delivered. Can't imagine what the Dallas Cowboys must feel like, because I could tell you, once they blocked that punt, if they would have just stayed away from the ball, they would have got the ball in Bengals territory. And their kicker, Brandon Aubrey, is one of the best in the National Football League. He would have lined up and they would have kicked the field goal and won it 23-20. Instead, the Dallas Cowboys, you had a player not knowing the rules. If you block a punt and it goes past the line of scrimmage, you yell, Peter, Peter. Everybody's got to get away from it. Because if one of your players on the Dallas Cowboys team touches that ball and doesn't fully fall on it and recover it, it's like a muffed punt. The ball is then live for the Cincinnati Bengals to jump on it. And it's a good thing that Darren Simmons had all of the Bengals player alerted to what the situation was. Once the Dallas Cowboys player touched the ball, you could tell that Cincinnati Bengals players were alert, that they knew the ball was live, and they fell on it and got the ball back for the Cincinnati Bengals. It took, of course, Joe Burrow no time to get the ball over to Jamar Chase for a 40-yard catch and run and the game winner. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting online, it provides you with all of the action and the ability to watch the game as it happens, with the world's largest selection of odds and everything from football, NBA, college, basketball, NHL, and UCF. All you got to do is head to BetOnline today. And don't forget to use your promo code Bleav, B-L-E-A-V, for your welcome bonus. BetOnline, of course, the game starts here. We're joined by our Bleav in Bengals insider, Charlie Goldsmith. Charlie, how you doing today? Look, the Monday night game, it was one of great surprise. Joe Burrow said it. They needed the bounce of the ball to go their way. When you saw that the punt was going to be blocked, and then you saw that the Bengals end up recovering it because it went past the line of scrimmage, which meant it was a live ball once the Cowboys player touched it. What came to mind? It seemed like they finally got some ounce of good fortune.
Yeah, I guess the first thing that came to mind was I don't read a lot of thesis papers and studies and deep analytic stuff, but there's one that I'm familiar with, which shows that 1-score games, so much of it is just true random chance, true variability, whether or not the ball, quite literally in this case, bounces your way. And what I said out loud when, the ball tipped off the Cowboys, got a Mumajong Meadow, what I said out loud was, well, it's about time, because in some ways it is kind of like a coin flip. It's sometimes it'll be heads, but eventually for any team, it'll even out in those close margin moments, particularly. Of course, over a full season, the best teams rise to the top and the worst teams don't. But in a moment like the punt, truly sometimes it is just luck. And the Bengals had awful luck this year. But the sun is shining in Mudville on this Tuesday.
Yeah, once again, Joe Burrow throws for over 300 yards and gets 3 touchdown passes for the 4th consecutive game. They had lost the previous 3 games when he had thrown for that many yards and thrown for that many touchdown passes. So it goes to show you that great quarterback play does not ensure that your team is going to win. I want to start by at least asking you about the defense, because I do think they gave up some plays, but they made some plays. They seemed to be able to keep the score down well enough so that if the offense were going to have a big shootout, that they should have been able to win. But there were some mixed moments in the game where we saw Jermaine Pratt trying to get the safety to come up into the box. He didn't come up in the box. They end up giving up a ton of rushing yards to Rico Dotto and the Dallas Cowboys. What do you make of what we're seeing right now from the Cincinnati Bengals defense?
Well, I will say this, and let's start here because they only allowed 20 points and because they got to win. Let's start with that after we've had lots of conversations about Lou Anarumo. I think Lou had a nice game last night. You know, you look at a third down early in the game where there's a pass off between Cam Taylor-Britt and Marco Wilson, who got to Cincinnati like 3 weeks ago, and they pick up a motion on a third down, kind of pass off defenders. They switch, and that leads to a stop for the Bengals. Yep. You look at Geno Stone's huge blitz to force the spike basically for a third down stop. And then the third down stop for a third down stop in the middle of the fourth quarter. And then later in the fourth quarter, another third down stop. I need you to explain this play to me because I've never seen two linebackers at defensive end and two defensive ends at linebacker with the linebacker defensive ends blitzing and the guys on the end dropping back into basically a cover three defense. So to me, that was a classic Lou Anarumo moment, a pitch that he saved for a very specific moment that paid off. There were just some well-coached moments and a nice creative game plan.
Yeah, the reason why you do that is because you're trying to generate pressure on the quarterback, but you're trying to do so by playing zone on the back end. Literally, if your two interior defensive linemen are dropping out, you're not going to force them to cover anyone man on man, right? And you're not going to force them to cover long. So you expect to get pressure on the quarterback in a way that the offensive line isn't prepared to block it. And so we call that generating pressure in an unfamiliar way. And then you expect the quarterback, because the pressure's coming, to throw the ball out quickly. And if the ball is going to be a quick pass play, then you can use your interior defensive lineman to drop back in areas. And sometimes I've seen them throw it right to a big defensive back. These guys are, a big defensive lineman. They're so big, it's hard to get the ball around them. So you could see Lou Anarumo was just being very creative. He was trying to do some things that you didn't see them do, normally. And then he was also trying to make sure that he was helping Trey Hendrickson, who is our really only legitimate, consistent pass rusher, that we've got to give him some help. Because other than that, they're just going to double team him and force somebody else to beat him in the pass rush. And because we can't get anyone else to win there on a consistent basis, he was just trying to figure out another way to get pressure, another way to confuse the Dallas Cowboys offensive line and even force Cooper Rush into some early errant throws. I thought he did a good job of that all night long. I want to go back to Joe Burrow and what he's done. 5 consecutive games with 3 touchdown passes or more, 4 consecutive games of over 300-yard passing and 3 touchdown passes. We've only had 4 quarterbacks to do this, I think, since 1970, to have that many games of 300 yards passing with 3 touchdowns. Talking about the likes of Peyton Manning, Patrick Mahomes. You also have got Steve Young. All of them were MVP-type players. Is Joe Burrow performing at an MVP level?
Completely. And then what we haven't discussed enough is, man, this offensive line's in rough shape. And Burrow just keeps overcoming it. Like, look at what the Cowboys did yesterday. Their initial game plan was, all right, line Parsons up on the right guard and the right tackle and have him wreck the game on that side. And maybe Alex Kappa played his worst game as a Bengal. Mims had some moments where he struggled, some penalties as well. But then they kind of saved the card. But in the last, late in the fourth, Parsons to the left tackle and just let him go up against backup Cody Ford, who's playing out of position. So they just had so many options. It was like a buffet of options for Micah Parsons to get to the quarterback, and they were able to pick and choose what they wanted in specific matchups. And Parsons, I know he didn't have a sack, but he certainly got his way. But still, despite that, Burrow to still produce the way he did, under pressure, more climbing up in the pocket, throws on the move, a lot of play action. That was a nice adjustment they made to try to mitigate some of that. And again, more than enough plays for the Bengals to win. Yeah,
and look, Jamar Chase just continues to be such a reliable source for Joe Burrow. You could tell right after we got the ball back after the block punt, fumble, and then the recovery by John Mehta, they waste no time going right to Jamar Chase. We weren't going to do that again, right? Get into a critical moment and throw the ball elsewhere. How deliberate were they into saying, hey, get the ball to Jamar and let him win the game for us?
Well, he caught about 70 those deep out routes yesterday, which is a route that maybe he's run the most in his career in Cincinnati. Yeah. And the reason they had that so consistently was one part of Dallas's ethos is they play as much man as they do. And two, they weren't like aggressively clouding and bracketing Jamar in the mid-range. What they had was they had a safety vertical over the top, and then their corners were, not pressed, were dropped several yards down the field on the snap as well. It looked like a defense that was so terrified of Jamar Chase beating them deep that they let him catch the ball 15 times. And what do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 of those were those deep out routes where you could see like Diggs thinking, don't get beat deep, don't get beat deep, don't get beat deep. Yeah. And then just giving up the underneath stuff. They had some nice counters off that as well. A slant, a dig where Chase faked the route he had run a million times and then did something else. Just another week where they just had a terrific creative idea of a way to feature him the way he should be.
So now he's the Triple Crown threat leader, right? And what we mean by that, the Triple Crown in wide receiver lore, he currently leads the NFL in receiving yards and receptions, and his 15 receiving touchdowns is more than any other player. So he leads the league in all three critical categories as it pertains to a wide receiver. So every time he makes one of these plays, you know what I'm hearing? Cha-ching, cha-ching. It's like the cash registers ringing. Please tell me that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be able to re-sign Jamar Chase after this season. I know he has the 5th-year option out there. I know there's a franchise tag that could potentially be looming, but tell me that a contract is still going to be able to get done despite that he's really putting himself in that category to be the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, I haven't heard any doubts or any whispers that Jamar won't get that deal done. Even when it didn't get done in September, It didn't feel like it didn't have anywhere near this sense of finality like situations we've seen with a Tee Higgins, who I'm sure we'll talk about, or Jesse Bates as well. It very much seemed like a talk to you later as opposed to talks are over type moment. And that's exactly what it was. Everyone knows these talks are going to resume in the offseason, and Chase will ask for the moon and he'll probably get it. The Bengals are preparing. That's the business they're in, and they should be in the business to do the same with Tee Higgins, in my opinion. But Jamar certainly has been the priority.
I want to go back to Tee Higgins because recently reports are coming out that Joe Burrow said he is confident that Tee Higgins will return to play for this team in 2025. We all know he's on a franchise deal. The date has already gone and passed for them to get the long-term contract done. The only time that they can now renegotiate that is when they hit the market, right? I mean, he's going to hit the market. Joe Burrow seems like he's willing to do maybe something special to ensure that it happens. What are you hearing? What do you anticipate based on this latest report that's coming out?
So first of all, I keep Tee Higgins. Like, my whole philosophy is keep your best players. Yes. And so like the Chiefs, all right, they traded Tyreek, but they kept their 2 best players, in my opinion, and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. It just, aside from Patrick Mahomes, of course, it just so happens that the Bengals' 2 best players outside of Joe Burrow play the same position. I even think T's better, and especially over the next 4 years, will be better than Trey Hendrickson. And of course, like, will they keep him? Will they not? Well, Burrow has always wanted to keep T. Always, it makes all the sense in the world. Burrow has always talked about a plan in place, I believe was his word, last January, to keep Higgins and make that happen. Burrow said that in January. He's confident. He expects it to happen. And then there was no negotiation pretty much basically between the Bengals and Higgins this past offseason. Those talks went nowhere. We have already seen a version of this play out before, and now that wasn't with the finality and the deadline of Higgins truly hitting the free agent market, which would come this year. We've already had 2 off seasons where Burrow wants a deal to get done for T, and a deal doesn't get done for T. I think it's a mistake the Bengals have made not locking up T already. It's not too late. And just like anything, there's a number where, you'd walk away. And of course, that number exists for T, who's going to have a hell of a market. But I would make it a huge priority to keep him.
I think the other question is with Tee Higgins, knowing that he can really come in at the top of the market going to another team, would he take maybe the second tier deal to stay on this team? I think that remains to be seen, particularly now that this has been drawn out so long and it's come to that moment of brinksmanship, right? The first one that blinks. So I think that's really about where it's going to be. The ball is going to be in Tee Higgins' court more than anything. Is that a fair statement?
Well, it's unfortunate that it might be that way, because Tee Higgins is a guy who's worked his whole life to set himself up for a life-changing payday that he's going to be getting very soon. And for Tee's sake, I hope he gets that. And the Bengals, what they have $90 million in cap space this offseason. Yeah. It's never been that the Bengals can't afford to pay another guy $25 million a year. It's about, how can you still get the defensive tackles you need and the safeties you need, and on and on and on. I'm willing to take that chance because you don't let your best players leave, but that's a conversation for the offseason.
How much did that help us this year, by the way? We didn't
Great point.
We didn't do all those things. And
so you have one guy who you know is great, and let's say you let Tee Higgins walk and you make the mistake of signing another Sheldon Rankins, Geno Stone, and et cetera, and that's and Irv Smith and Zach Moss, and that's what you do with that money. And that's not the best way to build a team. I'd prefer to go all in on my best resources.
There was a saying that always bet on what you know, not on what you don't know. If there's any uncertainty in the market, bet on what you do know in the market. And the players that you've drafted, that you've coached, you know them better than any other player that you could get on the open market coming in from the outside. I got to ask you about Trey Hendrickson. He leads the league. Our best players are leading the league in categories, whether it's whether it's Joe Burrow, whether it's Jamar Chase, and in this case, Trey Hendrickson, who leads the league with 12.5 sacks. Is he back in 2025?
Real quick about Trey. You know what I love about Trey? So we talked about Micah Parsons moving around and taking over the game in that way.
Yeah.
Trey rushes around the left tackle, and he just does that time after time, but it works.
He beats you.
I think T is better than Trey Hendrickson. I do think it is hard to pay a third, or I guess that would be a fourth, including Burrow, player at that price. Trey's later in his career. Trey's not an elite combine style athlete, and those players at that position do tend to age more gracefully than Trey would. So I would look at recouping my trade value that you would get by, say, trading Higgins, who again is like 25, and instead trade Trey, who's 30, who lets you really build towards a timeline of 26, 27 being all in years, still with T, and then with kind of a young defense that you'll kind of have to incubate through the draft, including an extra pick or two you get by trading Trey. But certainly he's one of the premier players at his position.
Really, really good stuff from you once again, Charlie. I want you to let our Bleav in Bengals listeners know one thing, because as I was watching the Monday night game, there was one player that's unheralded that continues to help carry this team as much as any important part of our team. How important has running back Chase Brown become to the Cincinnati Bengals, particularly Zach Taylor and the way that he's calling plays? How much does he mean to the Cincinnati Bengals offense?
He's just a really good player. This play it was an incompletion, but they called a fake screen go ball for Chase Brown. Running backs don't do that. That's a sign of the skill set. And last year, Chase Brown literally couldn't catch the ball. And now he had a 3rd and 2 slant that he did convert for a first down. The improvements we've seen from him there. He was a jittery bounce runner, who did all the things the coaches told running backs to not do by trying to be too aggressive last year. He stopped doing all that. He's about the right stuff. Boy, it's like what they're doing with him is like an MLB team throwing a pitcher 120 pitches a game. He's literally the only running back they use. Yeah. And he's managing all of it like a pro, and he's shining. He's getting better as the season goes along, despite the workload that he's handling. What a season by Chase Brown.
You've got to be a fan of running back Chase Brown. This guy has worked his tail off, and the way that he's producing for this football team, he helps the offense stay on schedule. He is the one-man band in that backfield. There's no doubt about it, carrying a tremendous workload on the offense. Got to get your thoughts before we say goodbye as the Bengals get ready to take on the Tennessee Titans. Brian Callahan, a familiar face. What do you expect, Charlie?
Well, Callahan hasn't been able to run the Bengals offense this year, and it's just because Will Levis hasn't been able to be a successful drop back passer. So what does Callahan drop from a run game, from a play action perspective? They have been trying to take shots. Chidobe Awuzie had a nice play last week. So it'll be fun to see some familiar faces who are such the core of what the Bengals built, and kind of exciting to see how they're putting their own spin on what they did in Cincinnati.
Chidobe Awuzie, former Cincinnati Bengal, Tyler Boyd, former Cincinnati Bengals, and of course, the Tennessee Titans head coach, our former offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan, due week 15 next week against the Cincinnati Bengals down in Nashville. Charlie, thank you for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. Talk to you again next week, my friend.
Talk to you next week.
All right, it's time now for our Performer of the Week, brought to you by French Creek Roofing, Greater Cincinnati's choice for roofing, windows, and siding. Of course, you can go to the website, and of course, you get special offers. All you got to do is go to the website to look at what you're going to get from the people at French Creek Roofing. I'm telling you right now, the Performer of the Week had to be Ja'Marr Chase. He shredded the Dallas Cowboys defense. 14 catches, 177 yards, and 2 touchdown receptions in the game. They had him double covered for most of the game. Do you know that? But still, the guy went on to have his 4th consecutive game with 100 yards receiving. Almost had 200 yards in this game. Had the game-winning touchdown with only less than 2 minutes left to play. You got to give Ja'Marr Chase all the credit in the world. He was lights out. 3 consecutive Monday night games with 300 yards receiving. Ja'Marr Chase is money in the bank. Pun intended. Cincinnati Bengals, pay the man. All right, it's time now to look ahead for the Week 15 action, brought to you by the people at Midwest Hospice. If you're dealing with the final days of a loved one, we know it can be difficult and very overwhelming. Give the people at Midwest Hospice a call. They've been taking care of Greater Cincinnati for over the last decade. As we look ahead to Week 15, the Cincinnati Bengals are going to travel to Nashville to take on the Tennessee Titans. Remember Brian Callahan? He was our offensive coordinator here. He was part of the early days of Joe Burrow. And now he's part of the early days of the Tennessee Titans quarterback, Will Levis, who, oh, by the way, is 4th in the NFL with 13 turnovers? This guy's a turnover machine. So Cincinnati Bengals defense, you got to have a great day against Will Levis. He's going to throw you the ball. He might even throw me the ball. Right? This guy is a turnover factory. The thing you have to really be leery of when it comes to playing the Tennessee Titans Week 15, did you know they have the league's #1 ranked defense? Guys like Chidobe Awuzie, former Cincinnati Bengals cornerback, he is one heck of a player. You know he's going to be there trying to do his best. Tyler Boyd, of course, is one of their top receivers. You know he's going to be trying to do his best. In fact, Tony Pollard, former Dallas Cowboys running back, he's the league's 9th leading rusher. He's about to break over 1,000 yards rushing on the season, playing for the Tennessee Titans. And Brian Callahan, the head coach, who's our former offensive coordinator, his father, Bill Callahan, one of the great coaches in our league, is the offensive line coach. They want to run the football. They're going to watch to see how Rico Dowdle, the Dallas Cowboys running back, ran the ball on us, and they're going to try to get Tony Pollard and the Titans running game off to a great start. I think that's going to be critical for Lou Anarumo and the Cincinnati Bengals defense. Control and win the line of scrimmage. Don't let the Tennessee Titans run the ball on you, and force Will Levis to have to make a play. If you force Will Levis to have to make a play, he'll throw us the ball. He's a turnover factory, a turnover machine. So we know that the Titans have the league's #1 ranked defense. They're only giving up 189 yards per game. That's right. They allow teams less than 200 yards a game in total offense. So this is a really good defense. They've got some good players. Don't let the record fool you. Tennessee Titans are 3-10. I would hate for us to go to Nashville and get upset by Brian Callahan, Will Levis, and the Tennessee Titans. So Bengals, get ready to bring it. Let's see if we can stack some wins in the final month of the season. And let's see where the chips will fall. Oh, by the way, don't forget to tune in to the AFC North version of NFL Hard Knocks. Great viewing, by the way, because if you watch, you'll find that Joe Burrow is purchasing a new ride.